Well, good evening, everyone. I got about 5:30 right now, so I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Darren Petrosky. I'm the district engineer for KDOT out of the Schnute office. I cover the southeast corner of Kansas. I want to thank you for attending. Hopefully the agenda, I see the agenda on the screen here coming up. We will have an opportunity to share your input on did we hear you right and what's most important, as well as the opportunity to learn about the study. Please feel free to ask questions and we'll share the study resources. Type your questions in the chat box and we will answer at the end of the meeting. And of course, this meeting will be recorded for our purposes as well. So with that, I will hand this over to Kristen Zimmerman, and she will handle it from here. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Darren. Good evening, everyone. We are going to jump right into this first section of did we hear you right? So for those of you that were at our previous community engagement in May, at that meeting, we asked the public what is working well, what could work better, and what are the opportunities along the current US 69 highway. And today we've got those results for you, as well as an opportunity for you to give us some feedback on if we heard you right in terms of your answers to those questions. So what is working well? We heard from you there are three things that are currently working well. The first is access to properties, that it's easy to access residential and commercial properties from US 69. The second thing we heard from you is that traffic flow is working well on the north end, that there's smooth traffic flow in the 4-lane segment. And lastly, we heard from you that road surface drainage is working well along the current highway, that water drains quickly from the road surface, rainwater. No overtopping occurs in terms of water coming over the top of the road surface, and that standing water on the roadway is very minimal. So those are the three things that we heard from the public in terms of what's working well. This next slide talks about the three things we heard from the public that could work better. So the first thing was traffic signals. We heard there are too many traffic signals. Signals cause traffic to back up. The red light running happens. That it takes too long to make a turn, and that signal timing is either too long or too short. We also heard from folks that traffic flow could work better, that there are too many stops leading to stop and go traffic, and that freight access to and from local businesses is difficult. And lastly, we heard that intersection layouts could work better, that there's a lack of turn lanes, it's difficult to maneuver intersections, and some intersections do not accommodate freight traffic very well. And then our last question we asked about was what sort of opportunities are there? And so from the responses that we got, both from the folks that attended the open houses back in May, as well as folks that filled out a paper survey or an online survey for any of these three questions, we heard really three things. One was a need to do some land use planning to maybe kind of reevaluate some local plans as it relates to development and redevelopment in that area. We heard there's an opportunity to enhance traffic flow, really for all vehicle types, cars, passenger trucks, school buses, semis, along the current highway for all travel directions, whether you're traveling north to south or east to west or traveling north and turning east, and at intersecting streets and along the highway. And then the last main theme we heard for opportunities is for economic development, whether that take the form of new commercial or residential development along the corridor, expanding current businesses along the corridor, or enhancements to better accommodate freight needs. And then we also heard many other opportunities were listed at specific locations, things like improving pedestrian access, or separating local and through traffic, and you can read those here. We heard those about specific locations, but these other main themes we heard to apply to all along the corridor. So we have put all of this information into an online survey that we're hoping that you all will take the time to fill out. We are, really the point of this is to ask, did we hear you right? We want to make sure that those themes that we were hearing in terms of what's working well, what could work better, and the opportunities that we are sure that we have a good handle on those before we move forward onto any next steps. So I've got here, we do have an online survey. It's open until August 23rd. Here's a QR code. And then I'm going to just walk us through a kind of a tutorial on how to fill that out. So feel free to open this on your own phone or computer as we're walking through. You can either use the QR code or type in the project website or the study website is ike.ksdot.gov/US69HwyStudy2024. And from there, we'll scroll down and click right here, this US 69 Highway Study Online Survey Round 2. And when you open that, this is what pops up. So I'm just going to go through and fill it out to give a short tutorial. So we have a couple questions here at the beginning. One is saying, did you participate in the first round of community engagement in May of 2024? I'm going to say yes. I would check yes if I attended an open house back in May, or if I filled out an online survey or a paper survey. The next optional question is our current residential zip code. I'm going to enter the Pittsburgh zip code. And then we'll get into this section 1, did we hear you right? So again, we did receive over 1,600 individual comments about the corridor, again, when we were back in May, and we've summarized them into these themes, and we just want to make sure that we've got that summary correct. So the first question section is, what is working well? So again, these are those same themes we just looked at. So it's saying access to properties. It's easy to access properties. I'm going to say I generally agree. The next one saying road surface drainage. That's working well. I'll say yes, I strongly agree. For example, I would say maybe I never see overtopping, or I never see any standing water after rain. And last flow is traffic flow on the north end. There's smooth traffic in the 4-lane segment. I'll say yes, I do strongly agree. This next section is asking about what could work better. This first question is asking about traffic signals, and we could say, what could work better? Traffic signals. I would say yes, I strongly agree. I might think that the signals are not working well in terms of efficient traffic flow. Intersection layout. What could work better? Intersection layout. I might say that I'm neutral on this. That in general, I find the intersections to function fairly well while I'm traveling through this. So I don't necessarily agree with this. And then the last question is traffic flow in the middle section. When I'm traveling, and that's roughly, for example, Centennial up to Atkinson, that there are too many stops leading to stop and go traffic. And I'll say I'll strongly agree with that. And then this next section on the survey asks about opportunities. Again, trying to get a handle on if we've got these main themes correct. So one is about improving traffic flow in the middle section. I will say yes, I strongly agree that's an opportunity because I believe it's not working well right now. Land use planning, is there an opportunity to kind of look at the plans as they relate to growth and development in this area? I'll say that's probably a good idea. And then economic development along the corridor, do I believe that's an opportunity? I'm going to say yes, strongly agree. Before I go on to this next section about what's most important, I just want to stop and take a minute and see if there's any questions, either about these main themes that we've heard and summarized from what works well, what could work better, and opportunities, and or questions or comments about this survey to fill out. Feel free to type your questions in the chat box. Oh, here we go. Can we see the scan box again? Yes. And get that open here. Here it is. So this is the QR code that will take you right to that survey. Okay, very good. I'm going to move on to sort of keep us on time, but feel free.
Sorry for I don't know if you can hear me. That my
Yes.
chat isn't working. Is it okay to ask a question?
Yes,
over?
feel free.
Thank you. My question was, appreciate the survey, but notice that cost and routing was not addressed. Is there a reason that wasn't included in the survey?
I'm sorry, what was not addressed? I didn't quite catch that.
The opinions on cost and use of funds and the routing of the roadway were not addressed in the survey.
Yes, and that's because we're just not really at that point yet in this overall process. We'll just a little bit later in our presentation, we'll kind of show the overall KDOT project development process that they use for all projects. And it always starts with kind of the first step is studying the situation, identifying issues and opportunities. And so that's really the step we're at now. The next step will be to evaluate different options, different concepts, and that's where and we'll be back in the fall, and that's where that will come up about some different possible concepts or options. So we're just not quite at that point yet. Does that answer your question?
It does. Will there be a survey at a later date which addresses those items?
Yes. Definitely KDOT is committed to engaging the community at each step in this process. So right now we're kind of at the study step. The next step will be these concepts, looking, and they'll definitely we'll have open houses, a survey, pretty extensive engagement.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good question. Okay, so let's move on. So the next part that we're asking for feedback on is asking the question, what's most important? So we've come up with these 5 goals that was based on sort of based on what we heard when we were our previous engagement back in May, again from these open houses in May and from the survey back in May. So these goals you'll see here are for 5 goals. You can read them here. So first one is kind of to define the corridor purpose. This would be a goal if we wanted to sort of provide access to surrounding development, provide safe traffic flow, and enhance the consistency of the current highway with the greater 69 highway to the north and the south. So this would be, a goal would be to try to make it have more of a highway look and feel that it does to the north and the south. The second goal area that we heard was there was a desire to improve mobility. Things like coordinating traffic signals, making the traffic flow faster, smoother, easier. Things like the traffic signals, coordination, rethinking intersection layout. Again, just kind of enhancing both north-south travel as well as east and west. The third main goal area that we heard that was important to people back in May was enhanced safety. This would be things like signage and pavement marking improvements, reducing points of conflict by closing access and speed management. The fourth goal we heard was that it was important to manage access. So this would be ensuring that there was safe access to neighborhoods and businesses along the highway. And then lastly, we heard a goal area for supporting economic development along the corridor, connections to and from industrial areas, connecting those to the highway, enhancing freight mobility, and then kind of serving as a gateway to communities. So these were the goal areas that we heard, and we would, again, like your input on these. We have broken these up into different segments. So as you probably know, the highway functions very differently along different segments. So the first segment is here on this northern end. So here's 650th, here's ARMA, and then the first segment stops at US 160. The second segment, again from the north, starts at 160, goes down to Atkinson. The third segment is here at Atkinson on the north. So it kind of goes along the city of Pittsburgh, here to Centennial at the south. And then the fourth segment starts here at Centennial and then goes down to the southern end of our studied area at the intersection of K103 or the Weir Corner. You might have heard that. So we're going to go back to our survey that we had looked at previously. And these questions are the last part of the survey. And we're asking this, in this previous section, we were asking, did we hear you right? For our purposes to make sure that we are understanding what are the problems, what are the issues, that we're really wanting to take an extra step to making sure that we are hearing folks right of, what is working well, what's not working well, or what could work better. We really want to make sure we understand that so we understand what are the problems. And the reason that we're asking this question too, what's most important, is so that we can really understand what's important to the folks in this area. What are the goals? What are we trying to accomplish? We really want to make sure that we have a good handle on what are the problems and what are the goals before we move forward to this next step of developing developing options for addressing those problems and goals. So in this part of the survey, we're going to ask you based on the segments, again, this one's from south to north, to rank what you think is most important and then tell us. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. So this is the furthest south segment. So I think mobility works pretty well down there. So I'm going to maybe put that at the bottom. I'm going to put that to number 5. Maybe I think economic development's really important there on that south end. There seems like there's some open land. That might be a good place to do development. Also, I think it might be good to kind of have more of a highway feel in that area. So we'll move that there. Safety is important, and then managing access, will be important, and then mobility is already working well. So that'll be a low rating for me. This next segment is Centennial to Atkinson. That's the stretch that goes around the city of Pittsburgh. It definitely seems like mobility is the biggest problem there. So for me, I'm going to rank that the number 1 goal for that segment, that we need to have some improvement on mobility. I also think safety is really a big problem that's got to be enhanced. It probably doesn't necessarily need to look like a highway, so we'll move that down. We want to make sure we're having access for all those existing businesses and neighborhoods around there. So that's how I'm going to rate that segment. Here's segment 3. This is from Atkinson to US 160, kind of going through the Frontenac area. Maybe to me, what's most important there is managing access. So I'm going to move that up to number 1. Whoops. Managing access. Yeah, move that up to number 1. We want to make sure it's safe through there. It's important to support economic development. There's a lot of existing businesses along there. probably don't want it to look as a highway quite so much, and then put mobility at the end. It seems like it's working generally well. And then this last segment, segment 4, is the most northern segment that goes through the ARMA area. So that one, the mobility works pretty well. I'm going to put that at the bottom. I think maybe we need to enhance safety through that stretch. Managing access is going to be important to get to ARMA. The corridor purpose in terms of being more like a highway look and feel, that seems important. It already is that way to some degree. And then economic development. And on any of these, if I think it's the wrong choice, you can always drag and move these around. And so then I'm going to submit it, and that will be my votes for both the goals and kind of confirming what the problems and issues are. Before I turn it over to Alicia to cover our next slides, any questions from anyone on the survey we have open now, or how the issues and goals were defined? Okay, we've got a quiet bunch here today. Let me get our PowerPoint pulled back up, and I'm going to turn it over to Alicia to talk about some of the study information.
Thanks, Kristen. So yeah, just going over that study information. So essentially, like Kristen had mentioned before, the purpose of the study was kind of just to have a better understanding of the issues and opportunities for the US69 highway and how that has an influence on the community it goes through. And it was just important for us to focus on like the impacts the highway has on the community. With that, this study area is from 650th Avenue south to K103, which is approximately 18-mile long stretch, and it goes through the communities of Arma, Franklin, Frontenac, Pittsburgh, and portions of Crawford County. Currently, right now, we are in phase 1 of the study, wrapping up the second round of engagement, where we did have those 4 open houses, 2 in Pittsburgh and 1 in Frontenac and Arma. And then just kind of looking into what we would see moving forward for community engagement. We do have that survey that will be open until August 23rd, which is when that is the last day you'll be able to submit a survey. And then from there, that is when we'll start taking that information that we gathered from you all and implementing it into those concepts that we'll be designing for the next phase of the study. I'm ready for the next slide. Oh, thanks, Kristen. So this is KDOT's project development process. Kristen briefly mentioned it. So there are 5 steps a part of this process. Right now, the study is going to cover steps 1 through 3. As you can see, we've studied the issues and opportunities, evaluating those options, and then from there we will decide. We will, with the help of the community, decide on those best options from what we've put together for the community to review. KDOT will make separate decisions to go into steps 4 and 5 for the best option, which would take place after KDOT's local consulate process, which essentially it does take place every 2 years. So the next one will be in fall 2025. But essentially, it is an opportunity for the public to vote on candidate projects proposed for this area. So essentially, at the conclusion of this study, you would be able to possibly vote on it as a candidate project if you would like to proceed with the essentially the concepts that we've drafted for the community to review once we get to that step in the phase. And just to kind of piggyback on that, KDOT is committed to community engagement at each step of these phases. So as we go through these steps, KDOT will put out information and resources that will be available to the public so that you guys can make the best decision for your community. Okay, thank you. And then just to highlight some community engagements stats from round one, we had about 261 people in attendance for the open houses, in-person attendance. We had 157 paper surveys submitted and 162 online surveys submitted, and about 1,161 individual website visits. Again, that was from round one of engagement. So hopefully looking to have more engagement and survey submissions as we continue through the study. Let's see. So now we can kind of open it up for any questions. Kristen, did you want to start reading from the chat, and then we can see if we can get some of those answered?
Yes, sure thing. So the first question is, I think in reference to the slide you had up on the KDOT project development process. So I might go back to that. The question is, best option, question mark, do you mean east-west alignment? East or west alignment?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, for your question. I can take a stab at that answer. If I'm missing anything, please, anyone from the KDOT team, please jump in. But not necessarily east or west alignment at this time. We have not drafted any concepts yet. We're still, waiting to gather all the information from the surveys that we should get submitted from this round. So those options aren't necessarily an east or west alignment. They'll be based off of the issues that have been identified to us. So at this time, it's not necessarily east or west alignment thing, and more of what best suits the community. Does that answer your question? Oh, it looks like it's typing. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking. Did anyone else have any other questions?
Could you go back to that stakeholder, kind of the numbers, engagement numbers there for a moment? And so the stakeholder session there, it looks like, does that mean like non-resident officials, like the local government, elected officials, first responders, freight? What does freight entail specifically? Is that just local businesses?
Yeah, so Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, freight would consist of businesses that use the US 69 highway primarily for their like freight drivers or semi-truck drivers. So that's what freight refers to. So yes, the stakeholder sessions was the attendance total from the stakeholder groups that we have. So first responders, freight, schools and transit, economic development, local government, and elected officials. Did that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Will there be additional polling from local businesses or like business owners who will be affected by the transit changes?
That's a good question. Kristen, do you mind helping me out with that answer?
Yeah, sure thing. I didn't quite catch it all. It sounds like, is there going to be additional polling for businesses that will be affected?
Yes, for business owners who will be affected by the potential change in transit routes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And transit routes. Okay. Yes. I didn't quite catch the end there. Yes, we're currently working on scoping for this next phase of the project to kind of figure out exactly how we want to communicate on this next phase where we're talking about the concept. So, for sure, I'm sure we'll have these public open houses like we had in May, and then that we just had last week and at the end of July. It sounds like you would be an advocate probably for some business engagement.
I would be. We have roughly 215 employees who would be affected by this.
Yes, I can say, we don't have that quite worked out yet, so I can't give an answer for sure. But I will say that to date, I think there's been an extensive outreach effort to talk to everyone that will be affected, the traveling public, the general public, the community in the area, these specific stakeholders. I know that for other KDOT projects, there's an intentional effort to talk to businesses and property owners that would be affected by any sort of project. So I can't imagine that wouldn't happen here. And I know Alicia will get to this later, but our next steps will be this fall, and so we'll have a little bit better sense of what exactly that looks like in terms of the outreach. Alicia, we had another question in the chat here. What factors will be considered in step 2 to help KDOT rank and determine the best option?
Okay, that's a good question. I may need to direct this one to Darren and or Bert, if you could help me answer that question sufficiently.
Yeah, I can help with that. I'm Bert Morium with PEC, the consultant that's been hired to do this public engagement and come up with some concepts. So, I mean, things that KDOT will look at or will be like, what are the benefits to safety? What are the benefits to mobility? Those are the primaries. Then also we'll look at economic development opportunities with whatever concepts that we come up with. In the local consult, for modernization and expansion projects, you look at when they rank those, they look at economic development, safety, and there was one other, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But it's those types of factors. Does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Good, sure.
And Bert, I might just add that definitely like the community input will be another factor.
Yep.
Both at this step 2, for this current study that's taking place along US 69. But it will also be, it's also a standing factor KDOT looks at in this local consult process.
It absolutely is, Christian. That's exactly what it was. I just pulled up my local consult stuff, and it's local input, economic factors, and engineering. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions about the study or about, moving forward or anything like that?
Yeah, it's
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I had a question
No,
already.
please go ahead.
And I was just going to say it's certainly a little bit concerning that that was kind of the bottom of the list and forgotten. But is for each of the different corridors that are being proposed there, before one is kind of drilled down into, I did see kind of the timeline indicated that there's going to be kind of some more in-depth engineering and assessments and some things like that in the timeline there. But are there going to be any number? It seems like the 3 main things to me, as you had mentioned, safety, of course, going to be one of the top ones there. Are there any specific trouble corridors trouble areas that we maybe have with the existing infrastructure that would be important to be addressed by that, and how the proposed alternative would address those? Second, of course, the economic impact and proposed development from the changes there. And then kind of the third one there, the residents and businesses that are going to be impacted by the either being displaced or even or also that would perhaps benefit from the change there. It seems like of those three things, like will there be any public estimates of like number of people and businesses that will be impacted, and kind of the cost to displacing those businesses and residences before the KDOT decision is made on which corridor or which perhaps change to make there?
Yep. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Darren. I was just about to ask if you could assist with that one.
All right. So the general process is going to be with this next phase, we're going to come out with like some options, right? And we'll have some very, very rough construction estimates associated with those, right? So we might have like 10 or 20 options, and we're going to tell the public, give us your top 10 of these 20 options. All right. So then when we get ready to come forward with the public open house next fall in 2025, that's where the public will choose which projects that go into what they would like to see move forward into the design pipeline and what we call a construction pipeline. So at that point, we will have a little more accurate engineering cost associated with those projects that meet that criteria to be presented at the open house in 2025. And then once we get a project that we select to go into the design pipeline, that's when the actual design work fully goes to forward and we get a more detailed, more accurate construction cost that is associated with all of those items that you have just listed, right? And that's when we figure out, once we get that point, then we go, okay, we got this much money, we can be funded for construction. So out of this, we'll come back at an a public open house meeting and say, which projects do you want as public input to move forward with construction? And that's when we actually allot and find the funding necessary to go with that engineered estimate cost. So right now we're just working with very, very rough numbers to give you guys a little bit of a feedback and estimate of what type this type of project may cost up to. But we don't get those more accurate construction costs until they go into the design pipeline. Is that pretty clear, Bert? Did I pretty much say that about correctly? And did that answer your question?
I do think so. That helped quite a bit. I think just kind of shooting from the hip, having some of those very wide estimates to say, it's going to cost between X dollars and X dollars, or impact X number of residents up to X number of residents, would certainly be helpful to kind of have at that high level, and then kind of refining it as the proposals get drilled down to a smaller number, like you mentioned, from 10 down to 5, kind of having a more refined estimate. That certainly makes sense. But with kind of what we're seeing right now, it seems like the general public, what we're talking about outside of it, kind of the word of mouth, if you will, is that, you kind of have the east corridor, west corridor, or kind of some refinements to the existing corridor there. But we don't really have any of those figures from what I've been able to see. So certainly let me know if I'm not seeing that somewhere, but it would be, I think, good for the early stages to have some estimate of, again, impacts to safety, the economic cost and, development contributions for each of those. And then again, the number of residents and businesses that are going to be impacted potentially by each of the three areas. So I haven't seen anything like that just yet, just really just the map there with the three areas. So, or three corridors rather.
And I might just jump on there at the end, or Bert, you look like you do too. I will say that, you know, this current study is focused on the existing highway, you know, that we can see in this slide right here. So that has been really the focus of this current study, you know, in terms of what are the issues, what are the problems, you know, that's been the focus here. Bert?
Yeah, I might go out on a limb just a little bit. I mean, the charge from KDOT was to go out and figure out what the issues are along the existing US 69. Okay. And I think that's really all the farther that we can look right now. You know, if we were to find, I think at this point in time, we're okay with saying, I think we can come up with solutions along the existing corridor, right? You don't have massive gridlock or unusually high crash rates that would generally lead to an offset alignment. And so I think our first our first strike at this is to be going to provide solutions along the existing corridor. As soon as we kind of start coming up with some of those solutions, then yeah, we'll have cost estimates, we'll have impacts to the adjacent property owners and that kind of thing, and that'll all come out, you know, next year, as Darren said, in preparation for the local consult in the fall of 2025.
Maybe that leads us to our next question online. The next question is, says step 4 would take you a year to prepare or longer.
Yes.
Bert, do you want to tackle that?
The short answer is yes. You know, as Darren said, as he explained in the local consult process, we'll come out with, or KDOT, I'm sorry, will come out with a list of projects. If you've been involved in the local consult process in the past, the way it works is in the fall they'll come out to Southeast Kansas with a list of potential projects and get input from the community, and then they'll go back and score these projects, and then as Darren said, they'll come up with a list of projects that are in what's called the development pipeline, and that'll start design. And yes, those designs will take, you know, over a year to do. Now, I know that there are some projects in the works right now that are not, you know, modernization expansion project, but they're improvement projects that Darren's or the folks down in District 4 are doing to replace some traffic signals, that type of thing. You might see some of those types of projects come in beforehand, some low-hanging fruit. If there's something that we can do to make improvements without going through this, you know, that are not extremely extensive costs involved with those, then those types of projects may come earlier. But in general, a major modernization expansion project would take more than a year to do.
We will bring a lot more recognition to
Curtis, it looks like you've got your hand up. What is your question?
Yes, ma'am. Bert, this question may be directed to you, I think, but do you have an idea on the estimate of the new right-of-way acreage that would be required if the existing corridor is used compared to the alternate route?
I don't right now. We just are not to that point. You know, we we've got some ideas of some things that we want to do, but we really haven't got to the point of trying to lay a template down there on top of a map and seeing how much right of way is going to be affected right now.
Format. An honorable form of publication dating back nearly 400
I
years.
might just reiterate that we're really, the goal for where we are now is we're really trying to understand what are the problems, what are the issues, what are the areas that work well, right? We don't want to fix something if it's not broken. And then what are the goals, what are the opportunities? We're really trying to make sure we get that right, so that when we do get to the point of developing concepts or fixes, that we're addressing the correct problems and addressing, making sure that we're designing the things that are the most important.
And paperbacks are still.
Go ahead, Maddie. I know you had a question a little bit ago.
Brownlee says romance novels are the only type of book that have become more popular online than they are in back. Interesting fact there.
Well, let's turn back to 4-state weather now. Meteorologist Brett
Maddie?
You are going.
Sorry, somebody listening to the news.
Sorry.
Will the cost of that additional right-of-way be considered in the overall costs and published as a part of those corridor studies in the future?
Darren or Bert, can you?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, all that information ultimately becomes public. I don't. I'll just give you a preview to put some context on this. When the projects come out for local consult, there'll be a dollar amount associated with each project. And that generally is just construction, okay? That's just projected construction costs. But right-of-way costs will be public. Generally, that is not part of the determination of whether a project moves forward or not. It's generally more based on the engineering scores, the public input scores, and the economic development scores. Does that make sense?
It does, though, in my opinion, somewhat unfortunate, as that's ultimately the cost to the Kansas taxpayer.
Yeah. Sure. It is a cost, but generally the safety and the safety of the traveling public, the economic development, the throughput, generally, I'll say, trumps the right-of-way costs.
I'll happy to
Maddie?
relinquish the floor to additional questions. But I think I just kind of my last comment here is I appreciate y'all taking your time and the thoughtfulness that was put into the survey. However, I think you've done an excellent job of evading what is ultimately the citizens' true concerns. And I hope that you will follow the word and the things that you've said during this conference call, which is that you will listen closely to the opinions of the citizens when it comes to studying that alignment and the ability to utilize the existing corridor paths through both Crawford and Cherokee County. And to that point, I think the survey was very well designed to lead to conclusions that are can be used in favor of however you decide to kind of sway them, if you will. So again, I would just encourage and hope that you stand by the word to truly listen to what all of the citizens and impacted businesses have to say about alternate alignments as you consider those routes.
Okay.
Thank you. Very, very good. Any other questions? Let's see. It looks like
Looks like we have Mary
Mary
has her hand up.
Susan. Okay, yes. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. Speaking of input, and I'm probably late in the game on this, but where can one get a survey that we can fill out to be able to have that input?
I will add, there's a couple options. I'll put a link here in the chat if you prefer to do the survey online. Or there's also hard copies that are at the KDOT office in Pittsburgh, if you'd like to go there and pick up a hard copy of the survey.
I'd like to do an online survey.
Okay.
So how would I get my email address to you?
Well, are you able to click on the link that's in the chat?
Let me look at the chat. Let me look. Yeah, I see it.
Okay, that's great. And then here at the end of the webinar, we'll post the link to the study website. And you can add your email address there if you'd like to be a part of the mailing list.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
Mary, did you have any other questions?
No, well, just that the input that I'm going to give that'll eventually show up on the survey is that personally, I think it would be really good to just work on the existing bypass that's around Pittsburgh. Work on how many stoplights there are, because Highway 7 between Fort Scott and Cherokee is being used by a lot of semis. There's a lot of wrecks, and it's really ruining the roadway as far as I can see. So to me, it seems feasible to just work on the 69 bypass the way it is and try to work out something where semis can go through without having to go through a bunch of stoplights. And that's input that'll eventually show up on the survey.
Good. Okay, well, very good. Well,
Good.
thank you. I think you'll enjoy filling out the survey because that was one of the main things we heard. Let's see. Maddie, did you have other questions? So you've got your hand up.
I do not. I'm sorry. I just can't figure out how to turn that off.
No
from my
problem.
phone.
I totally understand.
I do that too.
Okay, Curtis?
Yes, ma'am. I think my last comment kind of goes to Bert's comment about the cost of acquisitions through eminent domain and condemnation not really factoring into this decision. I find that a little concerning when the existing corridor, to my understanding, KDOT already has a significant right-of-way through that area where the needed new right-of-way acquisition would be far less than the alternate route. I have to think that this report that's going to come out by KDOT is going to have a cost-benefit analysis in it that is going to address and document this information and make it where it's public and we can see that and understand the footprint on one corridor, one option versus the other.
Yeah, I mean, that information will be public, right? It's just that it won't, that information will be public. And when we come up with alternatives, I just don't want to say that's the, KDOT's practice has not been to, I mean, they're pretty fiscally conservative. But the practice has not been to put cost over safety. And I'm just saying that when you see the information in the local consult information, that's just going to be construction dollars. It's just the way to keep things like on a level playing field across the state. But we will. I mean, they will consider it. but I think we're just skipping ahead. We're skipping way ahead, Curtis. Um, let us get some concepts out for you guys to look at. That really is the next most important step. Kind of a wishy-washy answer there, but just give us a minute. Is that fair?
No, I appreciate that. That's I guess that's what I'm going to get for now. So I'll just wait till we get further along in the process. I just wanted to be of record that I do think that's an important aspect to be considered in step 2 before we get to step 3.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh,
I agree. I agree.
very good. Yes, we've got your comment noted. Like Darren mentioned at the beginning, we are recording this, taking minutes. We'll summarize all this and get it back to the KDOT project managers to evaluate this as we're preparing for that next phase of the project. Any other questions on what we've seen to date?
Sorry, I do have one follow-up
Yes.
question. With both, I realize you're specifically addressing things in Crawford County today, but my comment would apply both to Crawford and Cherokee County, whereas currently Cherokee County has not been offered any of these listening or public information systems. But as you consider these corridors, will estimates of cost and maintenance over the long-term cost that essentially in loss of tax bases for these counties be evaluated? Cherokee County specifically is looking at a significant loss of property taxes, while a significant burden being placed on them in maintenance of a highway corridor that they do not want.
Just kind of a clarifying question. You're talking about, it sounds like you're talking about like if, for example, the western alignment were to move forward.
Yes, what would the cost to the county and cities be to maintain those abandoned roads?
Got it.
And will those estimates be published?
Got it. Okay, I will kind of reiterate it again that, you know, the focus on our study right now is on the existing highway, the existing alignment, you know, the current US 69, both through Crawford and Cherokee County. And so, you know, again, we're not quite at this point of the concepts, but I will say that, you know, that's been the focus of this current study, and that KDOT did publicly, you know, stop the design of the western alignment last year.
Appreciate those comments. I think I certainly don't want to overspeak, but I think it would be an opinion shared by a lot of the people and a lot of citizens, and potentially make you all's jobs as you try to sell this to the public or engage the public, if you will, much easier if the western alignment or alternate eastern alignments are being abandoned to essentially say so. Particularly in Cherokee County, there are several farming businesses which are being adversely affected because they're unable to transfer ground as they, you know, wait essentially for what this decision will look like. So kind of while all of these things are in flux, you're having a real impact on Kansas businesses.
Sure, that duly noted. We will definitely go back to the team. I can't speak for KDOT, but we'll definitely take that back to the team and be able to, that seems reasonable to kind of be able to make some kind of statement as to that, you know, on this next round. Bert, Darren, thoughts on that? Alicia?
I mean, I think we've been upfront to tell everyone that we are concentrating on the existing corridor. And right now we're just studying the corridor from K103 to 650th Street, north of Arma. And No, I mean, when Secretary Calvin Reed came out last year and announced we canceled upgrading 69 to a freeway, which included this everyone's western bypass, we've canceled that project. So that don't mean that whatever our consultant comes up with concepts to address the existing corridor, what that may entail, we'll still have to get public buy-in before we move forward with any type of moving it into the design pipeline and then the construction pipeline. As far as Cherokee County's issues of not transferring land, I have no clue what that is all about, because there's nothing that says you can't move forward and transfer and sell land and build businesses and anything associated with any KDOT highway project that I'm aware of until KDOT actually purchased right away. And we're not even remotely close to buying anything on right away side of things.
Understood. I think you can certainly understand that as business owners evaluate their investments, that an investment, particularly of farm ground or other assets of that nature, would be significantly impacted by a roadway. You know, in some
A new
cases,
highway
dividing
coming,
farms.
a new highway coming through the farm, huh?
So it's perception that would be preventing those business transactions.
Okay, very good. I am going to move on to a question in the chat. This question is, will the impacts to the Cow Creek floodplain be presented for public input before the decision is made with regards to the existing corridor? Any takers on that? Bert, Darren? I'll maybe preface, maybe while they're getting their thoughts together, that you know, like we've said previously, this is helpful to know, that this sort of information is helpful. The same kind of thing Maddie had brought up in her previous question about, you know, will some of this information be presented on the next round when the concepts are being presented? I don't know. I don't believe a decision has been made about if these floodplain impacts will be presented or not. But it is helpful to know that this sort of information would be helpful.
Yeah, yes, of course, yes, they would. But again, we're kind of a long way from that point, from final design. But yes.
Okay, and it sounds like more, you know, specifically for resident houses and
Yeah.
For residential houses. Okay, yes, we're glad to handle these questions. We know this is an important topic. We know this affects people personally. This is, you know, your home, your businesses, your families. We know this is important, and so we do want to make time to make sure that we're talking through folks, that we're open and transparent, and do encourage everyone to fill out a survey, be engaged. And with that, I'll probably turn it back to Alicia to close us out with some additional study resources and next steps.
Alrighty. So like Kristen said, here's just some more study resources. We have the project website on the left, the QR code, and the online survey QR code on the right. Feel free, if you have like any questions like after the meeting, if you would like to shoot them over to us, feel free to reach out to us through the engagement@ks.ike.org email. Again, study website information, and then the survey submissions does close August 23rd as a reminder. So if you would like more people to have their input be included, just mention to them that survey closes August 23rd, and then just, you know, pushing that link to them as much as possible. And then for next steps of this of the study, so right now we are gathering that input. We will develop concepts based off of the input we've received, and we will be back in fall 2024. There will be more information as to specific meeting details once that is available, and it will be made public so people can make plans ahead of time. But again, that'll be in fall 2024. From there, we will take any additional comments that we've received pertaining to those concepts and any public review that we've received to revise those concepts so that we can implement them into the study results in spring 2025. I just want to make sure am I missing anything? KDOT team, PEC team, just want to make sure I have covered everything before we close out for the rest of the evening.
I'm just going to go ahead and read this. Thank you, Alicia. I'm going to read this last comment on the chat here. His last comment: for the record, this process has taken place over the last several years, has impacted the marketability of real estate and the paths being considered. That's my comment off, this, we had heard that from Maddie previously. The impact is not positive, but rather negative, as there are fewer buyers willing to take on the risk of buying real estate that is under the threat of condemnation. Thank you. Yes, duly noted. We will for sure include this. Know that this has been a challenge, and we appreciate you signing on to the webinar tonight to learn a little bit more about next steps and to provide your input. Okay, well, with that, we thank everyone for your time. Thank you for the questions. We appreciate your honesty. Again, we know this is an impact to your homes, your families, your businesses, the marketability, property taxes, lots of important things up in the air. So we know this is an important project, an important study. We appreciate your time and do encourage you to take the survey, come to the public open houses, engage with your people, your constituents, your groups. We do want to hear from you. Thank you.